All right. Well, happy Wednesday, folks, and welcome to Back to School Retool. I'm Lauren Bryant with Startups and excited to be joined here and co-hosting this space with our friends Valerie Hessinger and Andre Wesson of Funded Strategies. As we dive into our presentation today, and before I hand it over to the Funded team, I wanted to just share some objectives for this space. As we know, this is back to school time, so we are greatly appreciative of you showing up today to join us in the midst of your busy schedule. So we are going to share some objectives and dive into our agenda. We are here to truly strengthen alignment between fundraising and operations teams by identifying shared priorities and opportunities and tools to really support you in a strong school year launch. Every year is unlike any other, but this one has its own set of unique challenges, and the synchronization between ops and fundraising teams is incredibly important. Our second objective here is to apply key operational tools to help map and manage the back to school milestones across functional areas. We will deepen the clarity of roles and responsibilities across your fundraising and ops teams through the frameworks and tools that we're sharing today. And we also hope to offer and explore how clearer team roles and strong cross-team collaboration can allow for more kindness, more productivity, and just getting the things done. So we are currently in our welcome and intro space. So if you have not done so already, please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from and how you hope to define success across this next 90 minutes together. So with that, I will hand things over to my friends at Funded, and I'll stop sharing my screen so we can get into the details. Thank y'all for being here.
Perfect. And I'll share my screen. Welcome again, as Lauren said, thank you for having us, Lauren, and partnering on this session. And thank you everybody for joining. And before we dive into fundraising, just want to wish you a wonderful back to school. As a former educator, I definitely miss getting ready for back to school and all the excitement that comes. We are going to focus on a strong start for strategic fundraising. Really quickly, I will be presenting. I'm the Senior Director of Fundraising Services at Funded Strategies. I'm a former educator, former Director of Development, and now have the honor and privilege of supporting schools all across the country to raise more funds and opportunities for students and schools. Also turn it over to Andre Wesson, who is with us today for his introduction.
Yes. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on what part of the country you are in. Andre Wesson here, Director of Fundraising Services for Funded Strategies. We are glad to have you in attendance. Very excited about the presentation today. Again, given our backgrounds and experience in education, we are aware of what it feels like on the front end of welcoming these young people back into the classrooms and back into the buildings. And so we're excited just to help support some of the thinking that you guys are already doing. Quite frankly, I imagine some of the work that you're already doing. We recognize also that people are coming into this conversation today with different access points, different level of experience, and different goals and strategies. And so we'll approach it generally in our conversations points. If they feel like they are not, don't have the depth, perhaps that you're looking for, by all means, we extend an opportunity to have that follow-up conversation, talk about your unique situation. We wanted to make sure that this is accessible to as many people as possible as you guys get ready to continue this important work. So thank you again for being here.
I also want to recognize NEM Honored team, our wonderful operations manager, who will be moderating the chat. And thank you for being here. This is our full team. We have a team of grant writers and development specialists all across the country who have a lot of background in education services and really truly know how to work closely with schools. We currently have worked with over 80 public charter schools across the country. We just hit our milestone of 20, working within 20 states and growing. And we have raised over $100 million to help support the schools that we work with. And our goal is to raise $1 billion, help our partners collectively raise $1 billion. So we have a very ambitious goal, but we are determined to hit it. Today, we will talk about defining your priorities and then finding donors and funders for your school. And then we will share some tools around developing a plan, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. Really quickly, our session objectives for fundraising is really, we want you to be able to walk away really understanding how to define and communicate your school year fundraising priorities that will align with what funders are interested in and will also support your needs as well as your community, school community needs. We want to help you understand how to identify, research, and engage potential donors and funders using some of our targeted strategies and relationship mapping. We will be giving you a lot of tools and examples, and everything will be accessible after this presentation. And then we have we want you to walk away with an actual tool or resource that you can take back and implement to help set you up for success this school year. And I will turn it over to Andre.
Yeah, wonderful. As Valerie shared, defining the priorities are critically important for organizations as they think about how to approach and engage funders. We typically start off this conversation with just some brief landscape scan on national fundraising data. As you can see here, a snapshot of data from 2024. I want to highlight and contextualize this just a little bit so we anchor ourselves as we walk through this conversation. 79% of donors in 2024 said they either plan to maintain their 2024 levels of giving or give more in 2025. Only 14% intended to reduce their giving. We found that fascinating. That was the lowest such figure in the past 5 years. And so this suggests that we're on a continuing trajectory for post-pandemic recovery among individual donors. That they are still very invested and committed to supporting the organizations that they care about. Now, what does this mean for education nonprofits? We've seen a noticeable shift in the strategic focus of national funders. They're tending to be more interested in opportunities that involve AI, math, continually supporting curricula, obviously addressing chronic absenteeism, and in some cases, and schools love this, LEAs love this, also being committed to the development of leaders and teachers. And so broadly, this illustrates that national funders are often looking for scale and impact. And now while 90% of funders are open to multi-year commitments, we love multi-year grants. Only about a third of nonprofits overall are actually receiving that type of support. And so what we recognize and what we stress for our partners is that this creates significant opportunities for organizations that can demonstrate long-term value, both for the partners and the type of impact, the funders and the type of impact that they look to achieve. And so as we think about national funders, it's helpful to understand what they mean. But for most of our organizations, we really want to be trying to engage those regional and local funders. And they happen to be less influenced by national trends, or at the very least, they often lag behind national funder priorities. So one strategic way to approach your fundraising is to first know what funders' interests are, and then asset map any alignment to your school's needs and programs. And so when we look at this Venn diagram here in this example, you can see we have funded interests on the left, school needs on the right, school programs at the bottom. And in this example, we have three priorities emerge, three common priorities between what the funders are interested in, what our school needs are, and what our programs are. Those represent growth curriculum, which you can see there in blue, tutoring, which you can see in yellow, and then OST programs with a specific STEM focus embedded in that. Once an organization has this level of insights, they're in a much better position to engage funders who share deep commitments to their community and their specific needs. And so you're also better positioned with this understanding, I think, to highlight your successes in these areas, elevating data to really capture and reinforce the achievements that you and your teams have been able to make. So we can proceed. And let me pause here. I apologize for talking quickly. As you mentioned, it's a co-sponsored webinar, so we have 45 minutes for this section. There will be time for Q&A. By all means, I think if you have questions real time, please add those in the chat. We'll be answering those. And if it would be helpful if I slow down, just let me know. And so again, defining your what. What is it that we need? Oftentimes we think about real time, I need to cover this budget gap, but realistically, our goal is to be as strategic as possible. Funders are interested in organizations that are focused, credible, and strategically ambitious. And so when defining your what we recognize at Fund Ed Strategies is sometimes it's helpful to develop a concept note for various programs or needs that just allow us to unpack those a bit so that we can articulate those better to advocates and supporters who may be interested in our causes. You'll see some of the specific questions here that concept notes can help you address. We actually have links, each of these three links to guiding questions and to examples that will impact for you how we work with partners to explain their specific needs and aspirations and raise money as a result of those. But just note that the guiding questions are going to do a very important thing when you're able to, when you get the slide deck and download this link. It helps you address project narratives and grant applications by really addressing a few things up front. You address your problem statements, your proposed solutions, what are your proofs of concepts, and of course, what is your value proposition? What does your organization do well that other organizations do not, or potentially do not do as well? The example for Mobilize Green, that organization has raised millions of dollars based on this concept note, and DC Bilingual as well. Both organizations in Washington, D.C. Has raised significant funding based on the example that you'll see listed there. What you'll take away from these examples, or what I hope you'll take away, is how they help provide clear insights on exactly what each organization plans to do and how it aligns with their goals and how it also aligns with the external supporter and funder goals that they are pitching these to. And lastly, on defining your priorities, remember that specificity drives action. Specificity drives action in terms of your team's ability to articulate it and the funder's abilities to receive that information and then respond to it, analyze it, and figure out if it aligns with their quarterly, annual, quarterly and or annual goals. Remember, a lot of times funders have boards who are reviewing these things. We may engage with program officers, but it's the boards who are making those decisions. So specificity drive action. Program officers are closer to the work. They get it, oftentimes have worked in similar spaces, but the board members, they're coming in and reviewing these from different lenses to make sure they align well with what the mission of the organization is. So specificity drives action. In fact, 1/3 of the donors, going back to that trend data, 1/3 of national, regional, and local funders for 2025 cited their need, their desire to support specific charities or specific causes as their main motivators. And so when we think about education, the common type of priorities here are the ones that fall into two buckets: your core programming and then strategic investments. Core programming are things like, are they aligned with the school model? Are they typically included in our annual budget? Where strategic investments tie into strategic plans that many of you are either developing and or have recently developed and or will be developing new 3- and 5-year plans in the coming months. The strategic investments is interesting because it helps accelerate impact, whereas we think about core programming sustains impact. Strategic investments helps accelerate impact. So this is where national funders like to come in and support. Overall, this tells us public charters and LEAs should lead when you're writing grant applications, lead with your specific urgent needs. Then, whenever possible, connect those to whatever your longer term vision is for systems change. Again, funders are aware that we operate in bureaucracies, we operate in challenging political and policy landscapes at times. And so they are not asking you to do what traditional nonprofits may be able to do with that same flexibility. They're saying you have needs today, but is it connected to a longer term impact? And that's kind of the sequencing of how you'll want to tell that story. And of course, incorporate student stories as much as possible, making it very real, making it very authentic, almost as if they can touch the reality of the challenge, and they can actually be a part of, as they're reading these proposals, part of that solution. They can see themselves being a part of that solution. So student stories and impact stories help punch up the sense of urgency that donors perceive when they are really reading really thoughtful and specific proposals.
Next up, we'll talk about, so as Andre just laid out, is like you're really at the beginning of the school year is really thinking about what are your priorities, and creating that list. Sometimes like we talked about, how we can partner with, ops and finances, like going to your finance team and saying, what are some critical things that we are going to invest in this year? Going to your senior leadership team, what are the key programs? So you have those concepts really teed up as you start your prospect research. So step two is really finding donors and funders. What we like to think about when we're doing this work is really starting in the middle of like who benefits from and who really cares about the work you're doing as you are identifying funders, who is in your community, and who is closest to your work. And really starting that as you plan for the year, really starting from like the center of those questions and then building out, right? So making sure that you are engaging your families, your teachers, your local community organizations first, and then really building out your prospect research strategy that way. And when you're identifying your prospects, what a lot of the questions we ask are really, like we said, who's closest to your work? Who are the community leaders that you should be connecting with? This is a great time to assess, like, who did I meet with last year? What are those relationships I need to strengthen? Who are the relationships I need to start those relationships with? Who benefits from our work? Am I creating those opportunities for the prospects to really engage and come see our school communities? Some questions we ask are like, are we asking our vendors for support? Going through that list. What are the local businesses in my area? And then what are the major companies that have a footprint in my community? So really asking these at the beginning of the year, what are those questions of like having that fresh lens as you look at potential prospects? Um, and something we like to think about is really thinking about your board. And when we're thinking about individuals and businesses, your board, your associate board, any board connections. We'll share a tool that we use with a lot of our boards around relationship mapping. Um, Thinking about your teachers, how are you going to engage your teachers in fundraising, whether it's, getting them involved to share messages on Giving Tuesday or end of year. How are you engaging your families and caregivers in fundraising? There's a lot of great ways to do that. I work really closely with my families, especially around like advocating for funds, able to really work closely with parents to secure a $1.5 million gift for renovations because the families were actively involved in fundraising. Sometimes we see schools partnering with fraternities and sororities, junior leagues. I worked really closely with my Rotary League, and had created some really great opportunities for students, your friends, your relatives, your neighbors. We recently had one of our school we work with, their board member just talked about the school to his neighbors, and they ended up getting involved. Who are those philanthropists that are really caring about your school community or investing in your location? Who are those elected officials? That's really critical. Are you engaging and inviting them to those really important events that you're hosting? Um, Looking at those, reviewing those annual reports, looking at your nonprofit partners. I think this at the beginning of this school year is a great opportunity to say, hey, these are our critical priorities when you talk with some of your nonprofit partners. And there may be opportunities to collaborate for potential funding, which can help expand maybe outside of those funders that just support charter schools. Like we said before, engaging your vendors, a vendor, thinking about who your bank, right? Like, or other different vendors that you work with. You can work with your ops team to identify potential vendors who might want to support your event. Or we, at my previous school, we connected with our bank. We found out that they had a foundation. We switched banks, and included in that switching was making sure that they were supporting our school. And as Andre highlighted, we asked for a multi-year gift. So making sure that you're making those connections. Like we talked about, the parents and alumni are really, really important, making sure you're including those and having those opportunity. and then also local businesses. In my previous work, I also worked really closely with a lot of local businesses to help support a graduation campaign. So going, literally a block away from where I was located, and building those relationships with local businesses, because those local businesses do care about the success of students in the community, and want to get involved, and they just need to be asked. So we also, when we're looking for finding grants, the first, like we talk about who's closest to your work, is really revisiting those past funders. Oftentimes we'll hear, we're getting this amount from one of our funders, and we do the research, and they could be giving a lot more, or, doing some moves management. So thinking about how you can continue to cultivate your current or past funders, maybe funders that haven't been engaged recently, and thinking about those opportunities. Checking in with your network, your board members, your community organizations, really starting the year strong of like, what's my calendar engagement around potential prospects. Something that we like to do a lot is like look at who's funding other schools in the area, who's interested in your work. I was previously working in the South Bronx, and there was a lot of interest in supporting the South Bronx. So really looking at like, who are the organizations close to me, who are the schools, nonprofits, and who is supporting that, because there was a big effort to support the neighborhood I was in. So looking at those lists, you can review websites, school board sites, annual reports, IRS forms or 990s. I also even say review their social media. Sometimes there's a few great organizations that I follow that thank their funders quite frequently. So you can see who are they getting funding? Who are the most recent funding? Sometimes social media will have that recognition. A tool that we use in our company a lot is Candid, and it is free for budgets under $1 million. They had a discount or an opportunity for that. There are also in some cities you can easily access it through an in-person site or at a library. And I would just spend, when I worked in a school, it's just like spend a couple days at that site looking at prospects and using Candid. We also recommend signing up for as many funder newsletters, getting on those lists. They are, that's often a common way for communication. There's a National Charter School Resource Center list right here. There's Grant Makers for Education. There's the U.S. Department of Education. And then the Walton Family Fund has federal opportunities as well. So identifying what are the local funders in your area, getting on their newsletter list as well, to help identify those funding grants, working with your charter school association to hear those opportunities as well. And then a tool that we like to use at the beginning of the year is a relationship mapping tool. And it's very, very simple, but we've used it time and time again for people to really identify who am I going to talk to and share about the work I'm doing at my school. And so what we do is like we have people really think about, what are those key groups that you're in? One of my previous board members was, an avid photographer, and that was one of his groups. And so whenever he was engaging with that group, he was talking about his role as a board member, and inviting them to get involved in the school. So I think thinking about what are the different groups, sometimes people will say, oh, I don't know anybody, I don't know who. But then once you start mapping out what are your previous workplaces? Are there companies that people are connected to? What are some college alumni groups that you're a part of that may want to learn more about the school and the work you're doing? And then once you identify your groups, what we do typically with either like senior leadership or with boards is, have them map out the group and then the type of the person within those groups that you may talk to. So, and we don't think of it as like everybody is going to donate. There could be different ways to get involved. It could be time, it could be your talents. Maybe somebody wants to help, in a certain way, or, be a certain advisor. So I think really clarifying that when we do our work, to think about relationship mapping. It's a very, very simple tool. And then, I think it's a great way to start the year of like, who should we, like helping everybody think about who we should be engaging, and how are we increasing our networks of support, and building that community. So I will turn it to Andre. Oh, oh, Andre, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Thank you. No, I was saying that that is a lot of information to take in step one and two. But again, after step one and two, step one, define your priorities, which, by the way, just helps set the tone for the entire school community, right? Again, there are a number of issues and needs that will come up over the course of a year and wish list items that different departments have. What we find is that having a clear vision for the year, right, defining those priorities helps anchor everyone across the year so that you can continue to add things to the list for future to pursue in the future. But this year, as you meet with funders, as you meet with supporters, there's a central story, almost one band, one sound, so that there's not confusing and conflicting messages being sent to donors, which can also dilute the pool and interest of people. So after step one of defining your priorities and step two, finding your donors and funders, it's time to dive in and make a plan. As everyone on this call knows, conducting analysis on the front end can be the easy part, but it's the implementation is where rubber meets the road, so to speak. And so our team at FundEd, we've given a lot of thought about how we can how we can proactively help schools replicate some of the processes and blueprints that we know are successful in the work that we do. And in making a plan, what you'll see here in a moment is this action planning tool that's linked here. Again, you'll have that in the deck. But again, it just helps you coordinate on these three specific components here: developing your top prospect list, identifying action steps that you can take for each prospect, and then building a calendar to guide your actions and your team's actions throughout that process. On the wonderful, as Valerie is sharing that, as you develop your top prospect list, again, your challenge will be to curate funders. Again, you don't just want a list of 100 funders and then just send out applications or spend time drafting applications and seeing what works. You really want to take those priorities, think about the Venn diagram that we had, who's most aligned or interested in supporting that work, and maybe come up with a list of about 10 to 25 top local donors or funders that you're interested in. And that becomes your set for the year. And again, you can see here in our action planning tool that you can organize that information from everything to the foundation, the status of where you are in the outreach, the type of proposal you're submitting, what are the next steps for moves management that we're tracking, what do we anticipate applying for, what's the probability that we will get that award, and then seeing it through. Once we get those wonderful award announcements, actually tracking that information real time also. When we share the deck, you'll have access to this custom action planning tool. And as I said, we use this tool with a number of our partners to coordinate and track moves management over the course of not only one fiscal year, but multiple fiscal years, depending on the nature and timeline of those relationships. There are multiple tabs here at the bottom of the spreadsheet. Some of those will be applicable for your organizations depending on where you are in your journey or how robust your internal fundraising and development programs are. But we have thought about this comprehensively, and any leader or development team, fundraising team could take this tool board, could take this tool and use it, whether they're starting their fundraising program or quite frankly, 5-10 years into that process. And as you have questions, if you have questions post webinar, as you start to dive in this and look out to this, utilize this resource. Again, if you have questions and need some support, we encourage you, reach out to us. Let's schedule some time and talk about what this looks like for your school and for your goals and how we can support that process. And within that plan, there are also strategies. The action plan tool will allow you to identify the strategies that make the most sense for you as well. And this is critical because we know that not every organization will take advantage or is even positioned, quite frankly, to take advantage of each of these sample activities and opportunities. But again, these are some things that you can do. Quite frankly, some of you probably are doing these things to engage new prospects. And or as Valerie mentioned, make sure that you're re-engaging people who are already in your network, and bringing them around a focused set of priorities, excuse me, in very focused settings that are designed to make the ask of them. Keep in mind, and we know this personal engagement goes a long, long way. This is why we talked about earlier student impact, student stories, impact stories. What does it look like for those communities? What is happening in the life of that particular child within that particular school or LEA? These sample activities and opportunities are just that. The trick is going to be figuring out what makes the most sense for you, and again, in thinking about your calendars and your schedule, your activities that you've already outlined, again, when these opportunities make the most sense. As you can imagine, again, we have up top campaigns, end of the year campaigns. Those are typically happening in November, December, Giving Tuesday. Some organizations find it helpful uh, to perhaps skip the end of the year because there's a lot of competition amongst nonprofits across the board, and they will launch a spring campaign. Again, the thought process and the rationale around that is really relative to your team and your community. But events that we've seen also work really well: happy hours, friend raisers. Note that any event can be a friend raiser. Note we don't say fundraiser, we say friend raiser because it really is anchored around this idea of network and relationship and buy-in for support, and then we make the ask. Any general celebrations, teacher of the year celebration programs, for example, athletic banquets, any number of these celebrations that you're doing, certainly academic banquets that you're having to celebrate your students make sense. When the board members are meeting quarterly and or separately, board dinners are often a great time as well for board members to think more deeply about their role in fundraising and or invite their communities to be part of those and use those settings as opportunities to engage. Back to school opportunities, which we're doing now, you have a captive audience. Everyone is thinking about this. In some cases, competition is a bit higher. But again, we find that back to school opportunities, end of the year, and then spring, early to late spring opportunities are really captive audiences. Monthly giving, some people are doing this really well. And what we found when we've talked about it, some schools have parents or community or companies in the community who are making donations quarterly, but they're not thinking about engaging those entities in their networks in a way that puts them on a monthly cycle, right? We often think about those high level, can I get $1,000, for end of the year Giving Tuesday, when in reality, for many people, it may be easier for them to sign up through their company and or to commit directly to making a $50 a month contribution, $100 a month contribution that adds up over time. And so the way that we even think about getting investments and allowing people an opportunity to engage goes a long way. Match programs, payroll deductions, etc. Not a full comprehensive list, but again, just some samples there. And we promised you, or Valerie promised you when we did objectives, that you would walk away from this session with at least one tool. By my count, through the slides that we've done thus far, we've shared 4 or 5, or you will have access to 4 or 5. But we also want to follow that up with a full, a more complete list of resources that you have. So in addition to the linked examples on the other slides that we've gone through, we're giving you access to a set of our customized open source materials. At Funded, we believe in sharing what works well. And so if you visit our website, you'll see a list of tools. We're sharing a list of tools here that you'll have access to in this deck. These are the same high quality tools, I want to be very clear, that we use every day with our partners to raise millions of dollars a year. In fact, overall, our organization has helped our partners raise more than $100 million dollars, and by 2030, our commitment and our goal is to help our partners raise a combined $1 billion of impact. And so these tools are what we use on a day-to-day basis. And we believe that they will also yield effective results for you and your teams as is if you were to use them. And so again, if you have questions about these, by all means, after the conversation today, follow up with us. I think as you use these tools, we encourage you to modify them, refine them, make them your own. My only request would be that if you share them out, or at least the originals, if you could attribute those to us, that would be great. And then if you have ideas about how we can improve them to make them more relevant, quite frankly, to the realities on the ground for you, we're very open to that process as well.
Now we'll turn it over to any questions. I didn't see any questions come in the chat, but we would want to turn it over to you for any ideas, questions, thoughts. And feel free to just raise your hand and Nema will unmute, or you can put the question in the chat.
As people are thinking through those questions, I'll highlight once you get into the slide deck and you actually start working through these links, you'll have a greater appreciation of why we chose not to click on specific ones and share them out today, given the time that we had. But I think you'll also realize the depth of significance that they have, the depth of relevance that they have for your organizations and where you are, again, whether you're starting your fundraising journey today or you're 5, 7, 10 years in. And quite frankly, the significance that they'll have. So we're excited to see how you guys will use those, whether you have questions there or not.
I don't see any questions. We'll give it about one more minute if you have any questions or ideas or want to share something that you're doing to start the year off strong. Feel free to add it in. If there are no questions, we'll turn it over to Lauren.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Andre and Valerie, for that wonderful intro to your framework there at Funded. I mean, I know I'm walking away with a little inspiration as I think about what it takes to resource the work of startups. But I think, as I tell you all the time, the resources and tools speak for themselves, but also so has the fact that you all collectively have helped to raise so much money for public education, for nonprofits, right? And in doing that, you are truly building the capacity of teams. Oh, looks like Thomas has a question here. I'll read it. What are the characteristics of a staff person to lead fund development? Ooh, that's a really great question. I'll leave that to you two to answer.
I feel like I want more information. So what are the characters of a staff? So you're thinking somebody staff on the ground who can support with lead fund development, or somebody you're thinking you want to transition? I love this question. I'm so curious. Looks like you might be coming. Oh, I think you just have to unmute. Oh,
Someone who can support the efforts.
oh, say that again.
Someone who can support the efforts of fund development.
That's not officially in the position, but on staff.
Right. If you're just starting that whole funding development in your organization, and you have somebody on staff, what are some of the characteristics that you should look for in a person who you might start engaging in that process?
That's a great question. I would say, I think somebody who really genuinely enjoys, who can communicate the mission of your organization, who is committed to getting resources and really, really enjoys building relationships with others. I'll actually talk a little bit about my experience. I started as an educator, and I was just like, I need to get more resources for my students, right? Like, so I started writing grants and just dabbling in some smaller opportunities, like building. I think maybe in your school, if you see somebody who's like connecting externally with, just naturally connecting externally or taking students in certain places, and really thinking a big picture. I also think in our work is definitely somebody who's a strong communicator, somebody who has strong writing skills, and can really communicate well what the school is doing and what your organization. So I think definitely like a passion, strong communicator, and eager to like bring in those external relationships to help strengthen. So, Andre, would you add any other?
No, I love that. I think it is spot on. And what I hear perhaps is partly some of the subtext of Thomas's question is this feels exotic. Oftentimes fundraising feels exotic. It feels like something that I need to be equipped with additional skills oftentimes to do. In reality, this is the best people, the people suited are the people, best people suited are the people already in the building. Who is that person that Valerie touched on, loves talking about what you do, who loves highlighting how what you do is different from the school down the road, all right, or the school across the county. Someone who lives and breathes it, but does it in a very authentic way. Again, incorporating the skills of how they track that information, track moves management, their open source materials like the ones that we've shared. But in reality, there's no substitute for that. And in fact, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is we provide that capacity. Even as being consultants, we provide that capacity when we work with partners. We specifically use partners, not just clients, because we consider ourselves an extension of the work that they do. We want to learn about their programs, learn about their mission, learn about their teams, learn about their communities, learn about their policy landscape challenges, and be able to communicate through that space to people who are interested in supporting. And so, Thomas, to your broader point, I would dare to say probably 50+% of people in a building already are the type of people who could do this work. The rest is just, really building on the training, going through some scenario building processes just to increase their comfort level with communicating with different audiences around things, and then feeling comfortable asset mapping. Okay, who else is out there that cares about this work that we do? I think that that's the characteristics of a person. The other part of that is the time that it takes for a person to do this, potentially on top of what they already do, which is a separate question. And again, shameless plug, an area where we provide support. But we also recognize that everyone cannot or is not in a position to work with organizations like ours. We have a high degree, quite frankly, of empathy for people, single shops, single development teams, executive directors who do not have development teams. And I think those do produce some additional challenges that we can talk through, but it doesn't change the fundamental nature of who's the right type of person to be able to do it. The type of person is the person who's already in the building, in the trenches, working with the students and supporting the mission every day.
Great.
The rest is how do we prep them to be even more effective advocates for people who have resources and want to support.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
That was a great question. I always also use the word somebody who's really curious, somebody who is going to learn what you need to do, learn the funding trends, learn like somebody who's like, because sometimes when you're in a school, you may be the only person in that position. So you have to like really use those external learning opportunities to, advance in the work. So.
And be great internally, right? Connecting with your colleagues internally, not just siloed in your specific area, right? The
Somebody
ability
who
to
works
deliver
well, yeah.
across the campus and elevate those needs and priorities in a way that really speaks to
Relationship building and yeah.
cross organizational impact, not just for the science department or ELA department.
Got you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Appreciate those answers.
Exciting. Any other questions before we turn it over to Lauren? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Funded Team. And thank you, guests, for being participatory, for hanging around here. The Funded Team has certainly offered you some very strong tools and resources, and honestly, just thinking questions for curiosity and frameworks to really help you tackle your fund development and how you approach that piece of your role in this new school year. So I'm super excited now to bring you 3 additional tools as part of our back to school toolkit to support ops leaders and teams. But before we dive in too deeply, want to tell all of those who are new to startups a little bit about who we are. So startups truly focuses on training, retaining, and sustaining operations leaders and teams in their roles in charter schools across the country. And so we're partnering with individual schools, small networks, large CMOs to really build both the technical and adaptive capacity of these operations teams and leaders. I don't have to tell you all how important ops is to the operation of a school, right? If the school is just like the body or an ecosystem, then the operations team is that cardiovascular system pumping through the veins and arteries and really touching every single piece of that school community. And because of that, we know that we have to offer a various modalities when it comes to training and supporting operations leaders and team members. So we offer coaching, staffing, systems design, and my favorite, I get to create lots of bespoke tools to help folks be more efficient and more effective in their roles. So this is our broader startups team. I founded the company back in 2018. I was an operations team member, just like each of you. And really, I think wrestling with how hard it is, honestly, to balance the demands of the role that are technical, that require you to roll up your sleeves, get a little sweaty, have your organization top notch, but then the pieces of the work that were more adaptive, that required relationships, that required attending and tending to. And so that's really the antithesis of why startups has taken the frame as it has now. Y'all will have to excuse me, I've got a little late summer allergies. But let's go ahead and dive in. So, our objectives for this session are to plan strategically, collaborate intentionally, and lead with clarity. And so, during these next several moments, we will be walking through our tools, such as the beginning of year checklist, our conscious collaboration worksheet, and the role clarity worksheet. Again, these three tools are essential elements of your toolkit as an ops team member, a fundraising staff member, as we hop into this next school year. So, as we get started, I would love for you to drop in the chat your answer to this question. What does successful school launch feel like for you in your role? I often like to ask this question associated with the five senses of what does it feel like, smell like, sound like, right? We know that start of school looks a little messy. There are desks and materials and things everywhere, but somehow magically it all comes together for the first day of school and back to school night. And so help us understand how you're feeling. I know there's likely a mix of anticipation, excitement, likely a little bit of nervousness, likely a lot of stress and concern. But I promise you that if you're feeling that way now, by the end of this session, once I share these tools with you, you'll feel a little bit more equipped to tackle your final punch list as we head into these upcoming days and weeks before school starts. So let's get started. I will drop into the chat a link. Let me stop sharing a link here to this back to school toolkit so that you all can access it in its live Google form. We will be following up after the session. I will send to each of you not only the link to access this, to download, to make a copy, to edit, but you'll also have a version that is a PDF that you can print and make easily usable with your team at your school. So now that you all have the toolkit reference, wanted here now just to introduce again what this first checklist is. And so the checklist is a working document. That means we update and evolve this resource every single year. And so it contains some critical Q3, so that is quarter three. In ops, we like to use kind of fiscal year language or calendar year language. And so here we're talking about quarter three. So thinking July, August, and September as we think about those final motions in this start of school run. And so as you will see, as you open up the tool guide, the toolkit, the back to school checklist is the first, resource listed. Let me get back to the tool. Oops, let's go back. Let's see. Excuse me one moment, guys, while I navigate my correct panes. Hmm. Allergies, disappearing pain, all the things, friends. Thank you for your patience. All right. Hmm. Okie dokie. There we go. All right, y'all. So now we are back in our toolkit. And as you can see here, I'm scrolling down. This beginning of year checklist takes up the majority of this resource. And so we have broken it down into the critical areas as we look at kind of aspects of operations and the breadth of operational work in a school. And this checklist is really built to both offer planning reflections and some clear task and execution to help support your team and that final list of to-dos. Given that it's August 13th and some of you are opening as early as next week, you have likely hit many of the things on this checklist, but we definitely suggest that this is a great way as you are headed into your final week of prep to click into any of these subcategories. So whether it's enrollment or emergency response and preparedness, what are those final details that you need to outline? If there are things missing, you are able to download this toolkit. And make any adaptations as you need to for your school specific team, right? As our peers at Funded are using kind of this open source opportunity for sharing for their resources, we too are there, right? And so want to share this resource with you now so that you can adapt, so that you can share it with your team, so that it can help to truly guide and offer some plays as you all navigate this final week. And I know, again, it can be so hard at this time of the year to give someone a checklist, to pause what you're doing, to delegate. And so our hope is that this helps you really hand off some of those items and gives people space to really reflect on, okay, is this comprehensive? Are we missing anything? For instance, we know that with enrollment, it can be super hard in these final days as you are juggling classroom prep, overall building prep, and back to school night planning with, okay, are we fully compliant with all of the students who are rostered to return or new students who are showing up? And so in this enrollment piece, I am actually currently right now working with a school partner to update this list of tasks as we think about what needs to happen in this next week as we prepare for the influx of students and parents. What do folks need to bring on day one? What might they need to sign? And then how are we ensuring that ahead of October 5th, which is count day in DC, how are we ensuring that we've got everything taken care of before that point? Many of you know that doctor's appointments can be hard to come by. So that's one space where it's a requirement of enrollment to receive those waivers or those immunization forms, but giving folks space. That is somewhere on this beginning of your checklist, we might add, right? Update parent communication with first day of school enrollment needs, right? So that might be residency verification form, excuse my misspelling. That might be immunization form. Oops, again, poor spelling. Right? And so this again adds to that checklist, an opportunity here, right, to sync up on what needs to get done. I see that there are some questions coming up here in the chat. Great. Thanks so much, Nema, for making sure to get folks the link. Um, but yeah, just I hope that this is helpful as you think about it's a comprehensive list, right? Day-to-day operations to HR talent, to thinking about the website and technology. And so use this as that first tool, open up the toolbox, mobilize your team around it, ask for additional input, right? There are likely things we may have missed, but plenty of things we have captured in this overall checklist. And so use it as a way to really guide these final days of organizing and getting information to your classrooms and your broader school communities. All right. And at the bottom of this first tool, you will see additional resources. Again, these are for our friends, targeted for our friends here in DC. And as you see, some of them are a bit outdated. If you know DC, you know that they love to release new tools at the end of the year or the right before the first day of school. And so you all will see this document change as additional resources come available in this school year or in these really next couple weeks. So feel free in the chat to drop any questions that you have about the beginning of your checklist and those considerations. And next here, we'll jump into the conscious collaboration worksheet. And so, as we think about tools to help our teams be most effective, sometimes you got to know who your team member is. And despite the fact we're on teams with each other, oftentimes we don't know the ins and outs of our job descriptions between one peer or another. And so, the conscious collaboration worksheet is intended to be a way to sync up on work styles, to align on the logistics and the necessary details of doing work together so that we can effectively be in right relationship with each other as team members. And so this resource is actually designed off of something that I was exposed to as an associate director of ops in a learning community with EdFuel. And so this has now probably been about a decade, but they introduced us to a tool called Let's Work Together. And over time, I've adapted that tool to not only meet my needs, but also to be aligned with what I'm hearing from our ops leaders and team members. And I'm sure I don't have to explain to each of you how easy it is to just dive into the work of fundraising and operating a school. It's easy, right? And so sometimes you got to step back and think about, well, how do I actually collaborate more consciously with my team members? How do I make sure they know who I am, what I stand for, and the brass tacks of working with me so that we can make sure that any of those negotiables can be talked about and negotiated at the front of our partnership. But also when we do hit kinks in the road or turning points in our journey of, working on a project together, we feel equipped to offer the feedback. We know how best to reach out in emergency versus just reaching out with an update. So this conscious collaboration worksheet is meant to be worked through individually and then shared with either your direct manager, a peer member of your team, or even a direct report. And it's meant to really set a baseline, a foundation to how you will work together across the school year. So, as you all begin to dive into your one on one meetings or your smaller functional team meetings, this is a resource for how best to, again, be in a relationship with your team so you can get to that technical work and be strong and effective at it. So, again, the first section here is who are you? How do you like to be celebrated, right? What does accountability mean? And then there are the logistics of collaboration, right? So checking in on what's the best time of day to get in touch with you. When do you like to get things done? I know that I'm a person who, when it comes to meetings with other humans, I'm best after 10 a.m. Now, I can have solo working time in the morning where I can just crank through some stuff. But if you want me to be my best collaborative brain, that is between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Now, I can stretch outside of that, but those are my best collaborative hours. And so my assistant Anam knows that my best building meeting times happen during those frames. Our training sessions happen during the times of 10 and 2. Because again, I am most collaborative and best at making the dots connect during those hours. And again, like this is also a space to identify your working styles. Just like we create learning spaces for our students in our buildings based on their variety of learning needs and accessibility needs, we are adults. We need that stuff too. And so this tool is also an invitation to self-awareness, an invitation to understanding, how am I best as a team member? How do I work best? What are the conditions for me to be successful? And how do I make my team aware of that so that we can be in best collaborative partnership together? So again, this worksheet, this tool as part of the toolkit is really focused on who are you and how are you in relationship with the people on your team so that you can dive into that technical work more effectively. Would love to invite any questions here about this second tool on collaboration. Feel free again to drop it in the chat. And again, we do have time at the end reserved for questions before we close out our session today. Before we pause and move on to the role clarity worksheet, I do want to offer here just a double click on the section around feedback and accountability. Teamwork is easy when you're having the meetings, you're setting the expectations, you're building a vision, you're identifying core values. The work gets hard when there's a different understanding of what it means to bring the ideas to life and to light. And so this feedback and accountability section is meant to really help folks understand, how are you best celebrated? What happens when we navigate a bump in the road? How do you want that feedback? Is it best in person, over email, via text? How do we get over those hard moments? And how can we talk about them now when things are easy versus navigating the hard stuff while also having to figure out how best to give the feedback or how best to really communicate through conflict, right? Conflict is not bad. Feedback is not bad. Accountability is not bad. What is bad is when we do not have shared understanding of what these words mean and how we are in relationship with each other and offering feedback that is both critical and celebratory, but also understanding that accountability is about mutuality. It's about mutual accountability. If we've got a shared vision and a shared goal, how do we as a team move towards that? And how do we ensure that when there's tension, when we are stressed and emotions might be heightened, how are we able still to communicate through that about what needs to get done and maintain the strength of our relationships and the strength of our collaboration? So that is tool number two. So your toolbox, you showed up. I know it wasn't empty because each of you are an asset to your team and you bring your own ops and fundraising superpowers. And now you've added your back to school checklist and this conscious collaboration worksheet as two tools in that toolkit to help you navigate this season and what's to come ahead. And for our final quick preview of a tool, we've got our role clarity worksheet. And so as you've seen from here, right, we've got the technical resource, which is what needs to get done in these next few weeks. We've then got an adaptive resource, which is really focused on how do I get what I need to get done in collaboration with my team. So how am I collaborating with the team? This worksheet is really meant to make sure that you are clear on your role so that as all the trains are moving down the tracks, you know what track is yours. And you also know when you get to that crossing moment where the lights are flashing, multiple tracks are intersecting, and maybe you got to change over tracks. You know how to do that seamlessly because you know who your partners are and folks in your team. And so the role clarity worksheet is really designed to ensure that you are crystal clear on your role as an operations team member and fundraising team member. And so this is meant to be an individual activity, but we found it most helpful when individuals do it and then come together as a team to talk about what was revealed and where their questions and tensions are. And so with this worksheet, the materials that you need to participate in it are your job description, this copy of Aspects of School Operations, which is a resource I will pull up for you now. And secondly is just your operations team org chart, if you've got one, again, just so that you remember who are the members of your team. Now, this role clarity worksheet really banks on kind of alignment and synchronicity with the 16 startups aspects of operations. And so in doing this work across the country and with dozens of schools at this point, we know that people define school operations in a variety of ways. And it's our job when teaching and training to ensure that we are synced up on what are those things, what is ops. And ops, frankly, we've got 11 folks on this call across our 11 schools and organizations. Operations holds different sets of these functional areas. And so on this aspects of operations sheet, which you all should be able to access and we will include in follow-up as well, you've got categories from budget and finance, communications and marketing, daily operations, which includes your transportation, attendance, emergency response, data and compliance, entity and governance, which typically is kind of the formation of your school, your nonprofit, but also the board piece. We've got family and community partnerships, hiring, developing, and retaining talent, instructional support, and collaboration. This tends to be one of those areas where it's like, is that the role of ops? And we'd say yes, right? Operations is in service of the overall school and academic program, and we carry our own priorities. But fundamental to the work of ops is certainly supporting and collaborating with instruction. This second column lists from office administration to procurement to school community and culture, right? Again, we are ops. We are the cardiovascular system. We are touching every single piece of our school community, and thus we are a critical part of culture. Space and facilities, we know that's top of mind for everyone right now, in addition to student recruitment and enrollment. I actually just now was in a tracker for a school partner, really right sizing around student enrollment numbers and what the work needs to look like across this next 10 days as we gear up for the first day of school. And finally, these last categories of team dynamics and growth, technology, information, and time are core to the work of ops, but also extend beyond operations and how we are in partnership and support not only of the academic model, but also of the experience across the school community, from teachers to staff to parents to students. And so this aspects of operations, this foundational tool is really meant to help you all clarify in your role, right? As an ops team member, it's likely that somehow, in some way, you touch every single one of these 16 aspects. But if you think specifically about the train track you're on, about the role that you have on this squad, there is likely only a handful of these functional areas where you are responsible for the execution of the duties from start to finish. And so that is how we intend for you to leverage this aspects of operations with the role clarity worksheet and begin to walk through what is my role? And what are the things that I do every day? What are those specific activities? What are those responsibilities? What things am I doing that are not included and captured in my job description or as I look at these aspects of operations? This question number three is definitely a point of conversation. If you find one of those moments, it's like that's when you bring this tool into that one-on-one with your manager and say, hey, I've been holding this thing, but it's not carved out in my role or in my job description. Is my success this year tied to me continuing to hold this body of work, or does it live somewhere else, right? Again, clarity is kindness. And so we hope that this resource not only helps you get clearer on your role, but also really operates as a tool for relationship building and how you are asking and advocating for yourself in relationship with your team leader or your manager. As you continue to look through this worksheet, you will see then that there's a big project section. At startups, we like to begin with the end in mind. And so with this, it's intended to, especially if completing this at the beginning of the school year, is designed to support school team members with really saying, okay, I am situated in start of school grind. We just trying to get to day one of school. But as operations folks, as fundraising folks, we know we can't be that short-sighted. We know we've got to think about October, November, December, shoot, even May and June, if we're going to effectively be in our roles. And so this is meant to be a thought exercise of saying, what are the key projects? What are the key tasks that I am holding on an ongoing basis across the school year and right sizing on that? Again, clarity is kindness. The clearer you are on your role, the stronger you can be in relationship with your team because you know your lane. You know where you might need support, but you also know where you can offer and extend support because you're clear on what you are required to do and how that supports and really holds up the rest of the operational infrastructure. Finally, I love in any worksheet, in any operations training, to really try to center on your assets, to center on your strengths as an operations team member, to really focus on those superpowers. It is so easy in operations and in, frankly, any role in a school that is not academic, right? Oftentimes, you are put in the spotlight when the thing goes wrong. And so this section of this worksheet is meant to be a pause and self-awareness. A pause to focus on your strengths and the assets that you bring to your school community. So then in those moments of stress, when the punch list and the task list seems unending, you are able to remind yourself that you are bad. You got it going on. You help to keep this machine running, and you do that because of X, Y, and Z strengths. You do that because you do X, like unlike anybody else. You bring Y to the table and you ensure that Z is happening without a flinch. And so this section again is meant for you to pump yourself up a bit. right? As you're getting clear on your role, as you're thinking about your kindness across your team, how you connect and support the rest of your team, the rest of your school community, don't forget to boost and fuel yourself up because you are an incredible asset to your team. And know that your assets, the strengths that you bring to your team are not just in, you showing up to work on time and leaving at the right time or leaving late daily, but rather it's the relationships as well. It's that social exchange you have with staff members, families, students. It might be the way you organize a spreadsheet, right? Whatever those strengths are, whatever those skills are, make sure you use this section to tease those out. And finally, here with this role clarity worksheet, we've offered some ways to keep this in motion, right? To keep it living. We all know it's easy to show up to a start of your training, get a worksheet, be excited for it, and then it start to collect dust in your Google Drive. This is intended to be a worksheet that you maybe can revisit quarterly with your manager, revisit on a monthly basis with yourself, just to say, hey, am I still clear on my role? Do these things still stand true? Is there additional clarity that I need from my manager? Or have I gained a new skill? Have I strengthened an asset of mine that I want to celebrate and bring to bear and bring in service to my school community? This role clarity worksheet, again, is not just about being clear in your role and the work that you do in your lane, but also how do you collaborate across lanes and collaborate across your team, again, because we are mutually accountable for a shared goal, for a shared vision for the school year. So that is your quick intro to your Startups Back to School Toolkit. Again, this toolkit includes your beginning of year checklist, the conscious collaboration tool, and the role clarity worksheet. I'll get back to our slide deck, and I want to invite any of you to drop into the questions. So drop into the chat any questions that you have about the checklist, any questions you have about the conscious collaboration worksheet, or that third tool we highlighted, the role clarity worksheet. I'll pause now for questions. Oh, you're welcome, Valerie. You're welcome, friends. Feel free to drop in any questions into the chat. Nima is also available to welcome you off mute. But I hope that these three tools, though we breeze through them, I hope you see how they are equipped to better equip you to navigate the start of school rush. That beginning of your checklist is quite detailed. There are so many kind of line items there. And so we have set it up such on that left side of the pane as a Google Doc that you can navigate just a specific functional area that is most helpful or resourceful to you at this time. Again, we know it can be overwhelming when you receive documents and toolkits that are 15 pages long. And so we hope that you are able to navigate that list of questions and key considerations as you kind of head into these final days of prep. And that conscious collaboration tool and role clarity tool continue to be tools that you revisit every month, every 6 weeks, every quarter, just to gut check with you on how things are going. Hmm. Oh, Thomas, thank you so much for dropping in some more of the context about your school. Like, I definitely get it. New school buildings, it's like you think that first the milestone is, oh, we need the building. And then it's like you get in the building and you're like, oh, all the other things. And so I certainly understand that when it comes to maintaining that building, I'm sure there have been from classroom usage and hallway cleanup to all sorts of things that you all have had to manage. And so as you take a look at that back to school checklist or the beginning of your checklist, I think really leaning in on the facilities pieces, really thinking about any culture pieces around what do we need to reset around community culture as we think about the maintenance and cleanliness of our shared spaces. What signage might we need to put up in terms of not only being in compliance, but how do we make sure that we're promoting healthiness in our buildings, right? What CDC signs do we want to put up? What reminders of safety and security need to go up? So certainly, Thomas, I definitely know that signage and shared space can be a big issue in a new building. Excuse me, excuse me. All right, are there any other questions or concerns? All right. Well, I will bring my co-presenters back on. And one thing we love to do at Startups as we wrap up our sessions is invite any final thoughts or reflections from our presenters. But I think also the other thing is we are always happy to see time back because we know y'all got long punch lists and things to get through. So Valerie, Andre, just wanted to invite you on to see, are there any lingering thoughts, final reflections to share with our learners today?
Just want to share, thank you for taking the time. And if you want to reach out or have questions, we want to be available and, want to provide our background and knowledge and resources to help you succeed. So like Thomas, you had a great question. So anytime you guys feel free to reach out to us, our emails will be in the presentation.
Likewise. And I just want to say again, thank everyone for showing up. We know you're busy, have a lot of other things that you could have been doing, maybe multitasking while you were here. Definitely hope the information has been helpful. And again, look forward, as Lauren mentioned, as Valerie mentioned, we look forward to deep diving on any of this that would be helpful for you and your teams in the coming weeks if you're interested. So don't hesitate to reach out. And we're wishing everyone a very successful, um, relatively uneventful back to school. Welcome the kids in, safety, of course, but just getting off to a really strong start for the school year is what we're all wishing for. And if we can be helpful, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yes. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Andre.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Nima. Thank you to Barbara, McKenna, Rustin, Tersa, and Thomas, and everyone else who joined us today. Again, we will be in touch via email, but if not, capture our emails from the screen, follow our organizations on LinkedIn so that you remain in the know of our upcoming workshops and ways to be engaged and continue learning. Again, here go these late summer allergies. But with that, we cede back to you all 13 minutes. Continue being great. Best of luck with start of school, and we will all see you very soon. Bye now.
Thank you.